Nightmarish imagery and mood engulf the player from the first moment in Yharnam. In Losefka Clinic, you awaken to find a grotesque beast feasting on a corpse just steps away. Its eyes lock on you, and to escape you're forced to fight with bare fists, an effort so futile it only delays the inevitable ripping of your flesh by its scythe-like claws. This brutal opening encounter immediately establishes the game's tone. It is a world of grotesque, scary horror, as director Hidetaka Miyazaki himself describes it. From these first moments, Bloodborne sets out to merge classic Gothic horror, the decaying Victorian city, blood rituals, wolf-headed clerics, with the unknowable cosmic dread of Lovecraftian mythos. In Miyazaki's words, Bloodborne has aspects from both Gothic and Lovecraftian Cthulhu-style horror, and deals with themes of loss of humanity and self in a city haunted by blood rituals. Every element of Yharnam's design works together to sustain a suffocating atmosphere. The city's architecture and level design are drawn from shadowy Victorian London. Narrow cobblestone streets, gaslit alleys, Gothic spires, and sprawling plazas. Town people carry lanterns through the mists, suggesting a once lively city now overrun by darkness. The interconnectivity of Yharnam's levels, cathedrals leading into sewers, graveyards opening onto rookeries feels labyrinthine, as if built to trap or disorient the unwary hunter. One commentator notes that Bloodborne's level design corners and ambushes the player, forcing constant vigilance. The world building is pure environmental horror. Scenes like Lady Maria's abandoned clock tower clinic, with frosted tools and chained patients groaning on beds, tell stories of human cruelty and suffering without any exposition. As a student reviewer observes, these hospital wards show the healing church's own atrocities through visual storytelling, requiring players to piece together the lore just by looking around. In short, Bloodborne doesn't just hand you a script, it makes the environment itself the narrator of horror, inviting you to explore and discover the terror in every shadowed corner. Bloodborne's sound design is as masterful as its visuals in creating dread. The game deliberately restricts its orchestral score to only the most pivotal moments, typically boss fights, while the normal levels are filled only with ambient noise. In practice, this means that as you explore haunting locations like the misty streets of Yharnam or the silent catacombs beneath the city, there is almost no musical score at all. Instead, you hear distant shrieks, crawling rats, rustling wings, and the hunter's own ragged breathing. This detailed and tactile soundscape sustains an uncanny sort of silence throughout most of the game. The effect is disquieting. The quiet is heavy and expectant, making each small sound, like a failing bit of rubble, a distant laugh, a clock's chime, echo with menace. Then, in a boss arena, the silence shatters with sudden music. Consider the fight with Ariete, daughter of Cosmos. You arrive with only ambient cracks around you, but the moment she awakens, an ethereal choir swells out of nowhere. The piece is, through composed and intensely dissonant, full of clashing choirs and floating meters. As Ariete fails with her tentacles, the music's beauty becomes unbearably tense, suffocating even. Bloodborne's score is noisy and dramatic precisely in these moments of high threats, concentrating with the prior silence. This dynamic silence amplified into sudden, jarring sound keeps player on edge. By the by, the same pattern occurs in every major fight. Ludwig's harrowing church organ, the church bell tolling, or the chiming nightmare choir in later battles. In this way, music itself feels like a monster. When it appears, something horrible is already unfolding. The interplay of silence and sudden noise heightens the horror by shocking the senses. Bloodborne's horror is not only in the eyes, it's in the mind. The more you play, the more the line between reality and nightmare blurs. This is psychological horror at work. Early in the game, your own hands reach out as the patient in the clinic. Later, after long nights of combat, even the player character reflections and inner voice feel faintly unsteady. The game uses the mechanics of insight and frenzy to gaining insight by encountering great ones or consuming rare blood literally causes hallucinations. Eyes appear on the walls of churches, ghostly children whisper, and the spectral beings drift in and out of vision. The higher your insight, the more easily you're afflicted by frenzy, a build-up that ends in a frenzied spiral. As one analyst observes, this interplay reflects the Lovecraftian aesthetic of cosmic knowledge countervailing sanity. In other words, every bit of arcane truth you uncover pushes the hunter closer to madness. This is reinforced by the story and dialogue. NPCs warn, fear the old blood. Phrase repeated like a mantra, implying that the very knowledge of Yharnam's secrets is perilous. Friendships turn tragic when Gascoigne's loyalty collapses. He transforms into the very beast he hunts, a chilling example of how anyone can lose their humanity. Later, you meet Margot's wet nurse and the cosmic amygdala creatures that seem to exist partly out of reality. These encounters feel like dream logic nightmares. Hallways stretch impossibly, rooms shift under a red moon, and even time wraps. The result is that the player's sense of self is constantly challenged. You never feel entirely safe, even your own eyes deceive you. In this way, Bloodborne's narrative whispers horror directly into your psyche. You may arrive thinking your mission is simple: cure a plague. But as the layers peel back, you realize your mind is as much a battleground as your sword-wielding arms. Bloodborne's most visceral fear comes from what bodies do when they go wrong. Body horror, the grotesque distortion of flesh, is everywhere. A recent study notes Bloodborne is filled with grotesque, shape-shifting monsters and bodily horrors, all emanating from a corrupt bloodline. Every enemy demonstrates this. The blood-starved beast is a walking ulcer, its entrails exposed like an open wound as it thrashes about. Clergymen and hunters once human sprout horns and claws in mid-combat. Father Gascoigne's tragic self in particular is a reminder that even the player character could face that fate. The horrors only escalate in the Chalice dungeons, where monstrosities hide body parts fused into ceiling tiles or scattered like puzzle pieces. Even the more alien enemies take human form twisted into nightmare. For instance, the small celestial emissaries are disturbing. Naked little girls with bloated pale blue heads and wrinkled inhuman hands. Their childlike bodies twisted with alien features give them an airy, otherworldly feel. As one reviewer notes, they have squid-like bipedal with a bulbous blue head, evidently meant to unsettle. In the lecture hall, you meet monstrosities who quietly moan while strapped to table, evidently once human patients. In Yargul, hideous hunched witches peck through their own faces with blades. And of course, bosses like the one reborn are literally stitched together corpses, grotesquely conjoined. The game even lets the player flirt with this horror. Drinking too deeply from the old blood can transform the hunter into a beast, blurring the line between man and monster. Each of these images plays on deep fears: the violation of our own bodies or our loved bodies, and the uncertainty that we ourselves could become such monsters. Bloodborne doesn't shy away from gore or deformity. Instead, it thrusts them at you to capture that gut-twisting loathing only body horror can deliver. If psychological horror unsettles the mind and body horror disgusts the flesh, cosmic horror in Bloodborne casts terror on the soul. The game's biggest scares come from the ideas too large to comprehend. Yharnam's mystery centers on the Great Ones, godlike beings who exist behind human understanding. In lore and gameplay, Great Ones like Ebrites, Mergos, Witnors, Rom the Vicious Spider, and Kos from the DLC are explicitly drawn from H.P. Lovecraft mythos. They are described as cosmic beings, inspired by the stories of H.P. Lovecraft, which are both incredibly powerful and also wholly alien in appearance. Confronting them, even a distant gaze at their relics, floods the world with really big questions. Humans digging into tombs to retrieve their blood, secret schools studying eyes on the inside, and dreams merging with reality. The famous City Hall lecture spells it out. Humans found an ancient tomb of sleeping gods, the Great Ones, and their blood cures disease, but also taints mankind. The Lovecraft influence is pervasive. Nightmares are real, and you as the hunter are but a tiny pawn. One analysis points out that Bloodborne exposes the essence of Lovecraftian horror by making the player feel their own agency is virtually meaningless. In practical terms, the player learns that Yharnam's fate was sealed long ago, and any victory is a small reprieve at best. This is mirrored in the music and ending too. The new moon presence at the end is literally an alien creature that steals your will. More directly, a fan analysis observes that the Great Ones use humanity to perpetuate their existence, and their very presence turn people into wrapped, horrific abominations. For instance, Bergenwerf scholars become grey-skinned kin in Ebrites church. Before your eyes, science becomes heresy. Fighting these beings fills you with existential dread. You face creatures that could not only flatten cities, but could exist on Earth long before humanity. Bloodborne doesn't give easy answers, and this is by design. Bits of mythology are scattered in item descriptions and environmental clues, forcing the player into narrative archaeology. You piece together stories from fractured text. One might read of the sleeping cosmos, another of a beating heart hidden in the sea, but what it all means is left vague. In this way, the game itself feels alien. The true meaning of events is behind the player's grasp. As one writer notes, the experience is one of being put into a situation with a little bit of information but not being able to fully understand why any of this is happening. This deliberate mystery is classic Lovecraft. The knowledge you find only makes the cosmic scale more terrifying. What makes Bloodborne's horror truly unique is how these elements interlock. The environment lays down a tapestry of dread, Gothic ruins, dim gaslights, red moons that primes your emotions. The sound creeps around you with silence and screams. The story whispers unanswerable questions, and the monsters enact both psychological and body horror simultaneously. Each boss fight is a culmination. You sprint through twisted halls to the faint tolling of a bell, heart pounding, and then the music clobbers you with a choral nightmare as a towering abomination looms. Every system reinforces the mood. Even the difficulty adds terror. There is always the fear of losing all your progress to a single mistake, which tightens the tension. Despite, or because of the obscurity, players often talk about Bloodborne in the same hush-stricken tones as a masterful horror film. Each area, Central Yharnam, Old Yharnam, Hamwick, Bergenwerf, Yargul, feels like a set piece in a horror anthology. For example, Yargul plunges you into near darkness in a flooded nightmare city, with distant, eerie chanting so disorienting that it frayed one's player's nerves raw. The Honorland of Bloodborne, the Bergenworth Lecture Hall, with its spider monsters and screaming rain babies, turns academic curiosity into a spine-tingling terror of unknown. Even after defeating every boss, the true depth of horror can still linger. As one fan puts it, Bloodborne is scary in many ways, thanks to its top-tier enemy design and mysterious story. Each creature is a mirror of some modern fear: contagion, the blood plague, transformation, becoming beasts, and the insignificance of man, alien gods, all wrapped together. In the end, you emerge changed by the experience, just as the game's characters are. The horror of Bloodborne isn't a series of jump scares, it's an immersive nightmare that worms into every sense and keeps the player questioning what is real. In Bloodborne, fear of the unknown is built into the very mechanics. And horror is never just on a screen, it's what the player feels as they confront each grotesque shape, each cosmic mystery. This blend of Gothic atmosphere, soundscape silence and sudden chaos, mind-bending lore and visceral monster design creates a uniquely immersive horror experience that players continue to discuss and unravel long after the nightmare has ended. Thank you for watching, and if you have any ideas or any questions or anything to say, you can comment it down into the comment section. Until next time, don't you dare go hollow.